Breaking right now, off the top at 6, former President Donald Trump has been indicted by a Manhattan grand jury. All of this coming down in the last 30 minutes. Let's get right to the analysis here. A lawyer for former President Trump says that he has been indicted by a Manhattan grand jury today. The charges stem from payments that were made during the 2016 presidential campaign to adult film star Stormy Daniels. This is the first ever criminal indictment against a former United States president. Trump's lawyer, Joe Tocopina, told the Associated Press that the grand jury had been meeting for months before voting to indict the former president, and he has denied any wrongdoing in this case. So let's first look at exactly how this process goes. When a grand jury decides to indict anyone, they take a vote based on the evidence that has been presented by prosecutors in the grand jury room, traditionally secret. We know in New York that it requires 12 members of the grand jury, which can be a body as big as 23, but 12 members have to agree that there is reasonable cause to believe that a crime was committed here. Now, what exactly are we talking about when we're talking about the crimes at issue here, where there are really two crimes based on publicly reported information that we know? Again, everything that happens in a grand jury is supposed to be secret, but there has been some public reports of what exactly the grand jury is looking at. They're essentially looking at a misdemeanor charge of what is a bookkeeping record, and they're looking at whether President Trump knowingly caused a subordinate to falsify a business record. In this case, potentially Michael Cohen, his former fixer, who pleaded guilty to federal charges related to this same hush money payment to Stormy Daniels related to campaign finance violations. Now, what can change a misdemeanor into a felony charge is if they can show the grand jury that this intention to falsify a business record was done in order to commit or to cover up another crime, perhaps related to campaign finance federal law. So the grand jury was looking at a number of crimes here, both misdemeanor and felony, from what we understand. We do not yet know what exactly former President Trump was indicted for. The New York Times and the AP reporting that there was an indictment, but not clear exactly which law he was specifically indicted for at this point. Angie?
Katie, another question we have, how does this work, though, when it comes to a former president facing a charge like this, knowing that this is historic, it's never been done before?
Well, even though he is the former president, the American legal system doesn't treat anybody differently than anyone else. At least that's how it's supposed to work. So typically when an individual is indicted, the grand jury takes its vote. The 12 individuals in this case would have agreed that there was reasonable cause to believe a crime was committed, and they issue what's called a true bill. And that true bill then goes to the judge. The prosecutors who were charging the case walk the foreperson of the jury to the judge and delivers the true bill, and then the judge issues an arrest warrant based on the indictment charge. And then the next part of the process happens, which in this case, where it is a white-collar crime, a nonviolent crime, with a high-profile individual, oftentimes there can be a negotiation between prosecutors and defense attorneys where the individual who is charged can negotiate a surrender, a time and place to come in and plead guilty or not guilty through an arraignment. And we understand from public reporting that President Trump will go through the traditional booking process, which means getting a mugshot taken, getting his fingerprints taken, and going through that typical process. Now, it's not always the case that an individual going through a booking has Secret Service protection, so there will be additional law enforcement negotiations that we understand there have been discussions, but there will need to be additional negotiations of exactly what that looks like. But procedurally, President Trump will proceed just like anyone else who is charged with a crime at this point.
Yeah. Well, Katie, I just got to ask you, I know these charges haven't been officially made to the public, but is there also any talks about these charges being heightened to the federal level?
So the federal officials who investigated this case under the Trump administration declined to pursue charges against President Trump. They looked into this case, and indeed, as we know, Michael Cohen, his former fixer, pleaded guilty related to this specific $130,000 charge, but they declined to pursue charges, believing that there wasn't enough against President Trump. So no, this is purely a state case at this point.
I know at this point we don't know what's in the indictment, right? Nobody does. But we also know that the president, former president, has been very clear he has no intention of stepping back from running for president again in 2024. So I know it's anybody's guess, but when it comes to his team trying to defend him, where do you think that they go from here? What's their defense?
Well, there will be a divide here between the political team that's handling the campaign and his legal team that is handling this process. And this could take a while. You know, to go from indictment to trial can take some time. And so we'll see what happens in the coming days. There will be an arraignment where President Trump goes before a judge and pleads guilty or not guilty of the charges that he is facing. And then it will be up to his attorney to negotiate the next step. If he pleads not guilty, then they will go into a phase where they exchange relevant information with each other and prepare to go to trial. Now, what that looks like while you're also a presidential candidate is anyone's guess.
Yeah, and Katie, as you mentioned, you were saying that obviously there will be some sort of a negotiation to have the president come to New York, wherever he may be at this time. Do we know, or can we anticipate or kind of gauge on how long that all will take place and how long he'll actually go to New York?
Well, the New York Times is reporting that could happen. The announcement could officially happen in the coming days. But this could move quickly. I mean, the arraignment and the booking could all happen in the same day once they are able to get President Trump to New York, if he's not there already. So it can move quickly once things get going and once all of the negotiations have been sorted out. Something we'll be keeping an eye on.